Are we live?
So we're live. If people can give us a bit of a hello in the chat box to confirm that you can hear us both and see us both, please do so. And please share where you're joining from as well. So I'll continue to admit people, and Sheree will be leading the session.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to today's very special live Q&A. We have a super impressive guest speaker who I'm excited to introduce you to and to kick off a really great conversation about all things related to female founders. But first, I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. We're obviously meeting on varying land for this virtual Zoom event, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I also want to extend my respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are present with us today. So if you don't know me, my name is Sheree Rubinstein. I'm the founder of One Roof and Oneline. We design virtual and physical spaces, and we have a mission to reshape the world of work for women. And given we find ourselves in very challenging times at the moment, with women being disproportionately affected by this pandemic, now more than ever, I am deeply passionate and dedicated to elevating women to success, and obviously share a very common passion with Kate, who I'm very excited to introduce you to. So just quickly, some housekeeping. I want to let everybody know that Kate is recording this session, and we encourage all of you to keep your videos on if you're able and feel comfortable to. We're going to have a Q&A towards the end of the session, and we'd love to see all of your faces, and it makes for a really great discussion. As Kate mentioned, we encourage you to introduce yourselves in the chat box. You can ask questions via the chat box anytime, and I'll make sure that Kate gets the questions. Otherwise, you'll have time at the end to ask verbally. Until then, can you please all keep yourselves on mute, and we will be cutting off at 1 p.m. Just to honour everybody's time. Now, we'd love to actually just see who is joining us in this session today. So hands up here who identifies as a female founder. Or if you're not, you don't have your videos on, feel free to post it in the chat box, or like Michelle's done, you can give a emoji.
I had no idea you could do that.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Really cool.
How are you doing it, Michelle?
Oh yeah, a few people have done that. Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
What about is anybody here, does anybody here have a business idea that they haven't launched yet and they're getting ready to launch? Okay. Is anybody here thinking about applying for the Atto program? Any thumbs up? Yeah, awesome. Quite a few. Excellent. All right. Well, we're going to talk more about the Atto program shortly. But first, Kate, let's talk about you. Now, many people here may know you from the early Fetch days. I know that was one of my first memories of you and my foray into the startup world, the Fetch being a directory of all startup-related events happening. And obviously, you've recently brought that back to life as a way of letting us know about, of showcasing all the startup, virtual startup-related events going on. Beyond this, you're a founder, you've raised capital, you've lived in Silicon Valley, you've built incredible online communities, you're an advisor to a number of high-growth startups through your consultancy Indie Labs, you are on the advisory board of One Roof, so I have the pleasure of talking to you and getting advice from you on a regular basis. You're a mum to the beautiful Elizabeth. You recently announced that you're pregnant again, which is super exciting. And of course, you are the brains behind Atto, this pre-accelerator program for women. Can you tell us a bit more about your entrepreneurial journey and how you got here?
Yep. Okay. And please let me know if the is the video changing for you, Sheree, when I talk? Because I spotlighted your video before.
Your spotlight for me now. So.
Okay, great. So it was about 12 or 13 years ago. I was a magazine journalist for Marketing Magazine. So I was like a B2B journalist editing their online publication. And it was actually through that, and I started this meetup in Melbourne back in the day called Social Melb. So it was kind of one of the first meetups for digital professionals, mostly around social media. And it was through that I started getting exposed to a lot of entrepreneurship and realized, because I was never someone that even really thought I'm going to be an entrepreneur, because most of the stuff that I got exposed to was like Richard Branson and flying jets and, you know, making all this money and all this kind of stuff. And so I just thought, oh, that's over there. Like that wasn't really for me, but I was a creative person. So it was kind of through that process when I started kind of creating meetups and then getting out and about and meeting all these amazing people, programmers, writers, thinkers, just through the early kind of Melbourne startup scene, that I started going, oh, hey, I can do that too. And I think that's how a lot of women get into entrepreneurship, is you kind of don't really, and this is a criticism of even women in code, right? If you're not really shown any role models or shown any pathways, you're not really aware of it and you don't really think it's for you. But through that process, then I started to realize, oh, wow, I can do this too. And I can create, you know, a company and put up a domain name and go through that whole process. And that's when I started defetch.com. And then after a few years working on that, I started my second company, which is Cloud Peeps, which is what I raised the investor money for. And now it's been a whole kind of decade later, and I've been responsible for making my own paycheck ever since, because that was another thing. To quit your job and just go out there is a big thing to begin with, because you're like, how am I going to make money? What am I going to do? So it's a process to kind of get the courage to be able to do that. And I think there's so many more programs now where you can have that flexibility. Even with employment, you know, we're seeing a lot more of the rise of the freelance economy, services businesses. So it's not as simple as you have to have a full-time job or you quit and you're an entrepreneur. There's lots of beautiful kind of gray area in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And your career has demonstrated how diverse it can be, and that entrepreneurship can include building businesses, you know, advising, working remotely, working on different projects. So it's pretty amazing, the career journey that you've had. We often describe entrepreneurship as a roller coaster ride. Kate, in your roller coaster journey, what's been one of the greatest highs and the kind of lowest of lows?
Yeah, definitely. So I think 2014 was a particularly great year, because at the same time that I just started working on Cloud Peeps, I did a crowdfunding campaign for the Fetch, and then it raised like $55,000 to build the Fetch app, which was brilliant. And then I also raised the first round of funding for Cloud Peeps. So this was the kind of, and I was like, wow, I can like have this side project, grow this, and I've got this money here, and we're working on that. And very much it was very much complementary, but quite quickly it became that once you take investor money, it's how you are and who you are, and all of that stuff gets challenged very quickly. So it soon came crashing down like the next year, when it was like, oh, I can't actually work the way I like working, and I have to basically work all the time on Cloud Peeps. Now I have this investor money, and I was even afraid to post like an Instagram photo of having a glass of wine, because in the case they thought I wasn't, you know, on the clock making the money. And then that kind of started to accumulate in feeling very, very stifled by this idea of like investors who are wanting me to hit these growth goals. And if you're not hitting these growth goals, you're basically a failure, or your company's a failure. And which is why I got into the Indie Way, which we can get into a bit more. So even if your company's doing well, if it's not doing well at the type of box that investors want you to be in, then it's basically, you know, you may as well give up. And at the same time, I was also wanting to, you know, look at starting a family. I'd got married 2016, but I found the environment still quite hostile to having this idea that you can be a badass CEO and also have a life and have a family. And there were comments that were made, which were basically don't have kids and exits before babies and all this stuff that really started to turn me off the growth at all cost VC industry, because I just didn't think I could be me and do what I wanted to do in that environment. And that led to this whole kind of starting Atto and just really thinking about things in a much more new school mindset.
Mm. Yeah, I want to come back to the challenges for female founders specifically. But one interesting thing I've found with you, Kate, is that you've been working remotely for a long time now, I would say. And I guess, you know, you've been kind of quite ahead of your times as the rest of us catch up to working remotely, working online, working with Zoom. How are you managing through the pandemic, and has that changed your you know, your life and your work in any way?
Well, it's quite funny because in some ways my life hasn't changed at all, because it was I was always kind of working from home. I'm at home now, and one of the big things actually that came to this thing is that I left Silicon Valley. So I was in New York, then I was in San Francisco, and then I left that to come back to Australia. First I was in Brisbane, bit in Melbourne, and then bought a house in Masson Ranges. And to anyone else before, you know, COVID, moving from like the epicenter of tech, where all the investors are and all of that stuff, it was basically like goodbye career kind of thing. But I was just like, I think remote is gonna, and this is before it's been fast tracked, but I thought remote was going to change so much that people could be based anywhere in the world, live in a little country town, and still run global businesses. And so that's what I was putting my money on. I was like, we're going to go outside of major metropolitan cities in Australia. It's much more affordable, all of that. You get a great lifestyle. And then COVID's happened. And in some ways, yes, nothing has really changed from my day to day, but it has legitimized a lot of the work that people in this space have been doing for a while. And if you are remote or you've kind of left a major city, these are all acceptable and totally brilliant things to do now. And, you know, Y Combinator, they're doing their next batch remotely. Investors now are obsessed with doing remote, non-face-to-face meetings so they can say that they're, you know, really progressive. So I think this is going to be a long-term future that we see. Yes, there'll be a return to in-person events and in-person spaces, but I think that there'll no longer be this weird fringe of people who work online.
And how do you think female founders are coping during this time? You know, as you had a Smart Company article written about you recently, and you were talking about, you know, the disproportionate impact that it's having on women. Do you think that for female founders there is space and time and energy and motivation to come up with new products and ideas and to pivot? Or, you know, do you think that, that innovation hasn't come yet? Because people are just really trying to cope with what's going on.
Yeah, and there's definitely a spectrum there. So I've seen people who are homeschooling to, you know, a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old, and they're maintaining full-time employment, and unfortunately they don't have a partner that is able to help. Maybe that partner's an essential worker working outside of the home, and they're completely inundated, and they found the challenge of lockdown and no access to childcare or schools extremely difficult. So I think that has been something that has been a challenge, and often a challenge for women outside of COVID and lockdown, as they've had to manage multiple responsibilities and emotional labor within the home. But then there's also the time that has been gained back from lack of commuting. Some people are saving 2 hours a day from commuting. They're saving hours a day from going to a lot of things that might not have been important. Like, I think that's one thing that this year has taught us, is to how to focus on what really matters, and, you know, health, family, and all of that stuff. And in those times, we've also seen a boom for creativity. So there's been quarantine crafters, there's been people doing lots of gardening, bread baking. So I think there's been a huge creativity and innovation surge, which means that women are now going, actually, it's a really great time for me to start a business, or I've had this idea I've always wanted to do, but I've always been so busy on the grind and the hamster wheel that I've never even had a capacity to, and now I have. And so that's why I think it's a super exciting time to reevaluate where everything's at and make those calls, because nothing's for certain. Like we've seen, you can have traditional employment and it be affected by a pandemic. So one thing is, if you can take control and start your own business, you know, that's something that you can, every action, everything you put into it, you can have control over.
Mm. And I think as an entrepreneur and founder, running your own business helps you with things like a pandemic, because you're used to, unexpected pandemics happening in your business all the time, multiple times a day.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so used to uncertainty, right? And we're used to having to change. And we've seen corporates do this now because of COVID. They've had to iterate, and the government extremely quickly. So I think that it is breeding a culture of innovation across the board. So it in some way there have been lots of positives to come out of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. Let's turn to the Atto program. So, for anyone here who doesn't know, Kate ran an Atto cohort last year. She ran it remotely, so it's interesting that Kate's talking about all these accelerators and companies now going remote. Kate had already thought about the value of a remote virtual pre-accelerator program and the value that has for women, and ran part of it out of the One Roof co-working space and ran the demo day at One Roof, and had an amazing cohort of women go through, with participants who have gone on to get into other accelerators and even raise capital. And you recently announced that you have received 125K in funding from Launch Vic over the next to run the program over the next couple of years. Can we just stop and do like a virtual round of applause, or maybe Michelle can find the emoji for that? Yeah, awesome. Bronwyn, Isla, thank you. Yeah, I think
I clap myself.
yeah, seriously, Kate, I think it's really amazing it's a great achievement through, obviously very challenging times. Do you want to tell us more about the program?
Yes, so we did run the prototype last year, and running it out of One Roof was just incredible, because that was one thing that, as I came back to Australia, to find a home and a community like One Roof full of just basically indie way founders anyway. So founders that are running all these great businesses, doing startups, but they might not be at every startup networking event or doing press every day talking about their startup and how much money they've raised. So there was a really amazing community to draw upon. And then the program was started because I was noticing that there was a lack in early stage pipeline type programs. So a lot of accelerators like your StartMates or your Y Combinator often, first of all, require a technical co-founder. So YC's had a huge history of just needing to have an engineering lead or someone on the founding team. And then secondly, that they wanted traction. So say if you've got an idea and you're not making $1 million in revenue, you might not even have a website up, you might only have a mailing list with 50 people on it. All of those things are too early for traditional accelerators. But that's exactly how you get started. You have to start somewhere. And so the program with Atto was to kind of help founders learn through 12 weeks, actually, what are my startup ops? Like, what's the basics I need to do? Like, I'm not incorporated. I've been doing it under my own name. Okay, here's some great tips there. All right, okay, I've got an idea. Now, how do I validate it? Now, typically, a lot of female founders might have gone to an agency in the past and spent 20K on some sort of app without any real validation. But because of now no code, obviously lean startup principles, you don't actually need a product to validate an idea. So you can almost like start requesting money on a PayPal button or something, and put up just do phone sales to begin with. So it teaches like customer validation as well. And then also business models, because that was also something that I saw in Silicon Valley, that companies that were raising 40, 50 million in funding, when they got there, they had really bad unit economics. They were paying, $5 to acquire a customer, then spending $10 to service that customer. And that's all fine in the early days, but as you start to scale, it kind of becomes this big Ponzi scheme that's going to topple. So profitable business models and not being afraid of profitability early on, and looking at unit economics and revenue models early on is really important as well. So that's also taught in the program. And then the program goes to how to build an MVP, and then building a community or an audience around your startup pre-launch. And then we also look at growth marketing techniques. And then if you are interested in raising angel funding, there's information on that. And then also alternative funding. So one of One Roof's members, Sheba, last year, they're an Uber kind of competitor, but actually focused on women and children and safe environments. They were rejected by a traditional VC. So they ended up going on virtual equity crowdfunding and raising 2+ million from their community. So it's all about removing these gatekeepers and permission around entrepreneurship, especially tech entrepreneurship, and saying, you can do this and you can do it right now. You don't need to raise money. You don't need to find that tech founder. You can actually get started and grow a business and test out your product without anyone else. And I think that's incredibly liberating.
And so who do you think should apply? Who should apply for the program?
So there's two types of people that I think the program is really great for. Someone who might have been entrepreneurial to date, but maybe not in the tech space. And so they're kind of a first-time female founder in the tech startup world. The program's absolutely fantastic for them because they're going to get established with this network and these people who have been in the industry for decades, who really know what's real, because there is so much bad advice as well. And I've seen entrepreneurs being given loads of bad advice. So it's about having a trustworthy network and program of good advice. And then secondly, it's also great for founders who might already have an idea. They might have actually already got a website up, but it's just not working, or something's happened, COVID's happened, so the market's changed. And so you might have been going at it for a year or two, but you're ready for real change. You really want to see your company succeed. And so you would love the accountability and structure of a program like Atto, where you can go through and make those changes. And I really welcome applications from those founders too, because I think if you're not getting that traction within your company, that revenue, those milestones, that organic growth, by year 2 or 3, I think it's a really great time to start to look at pivoting or doing something, new, or augmenting what you've got, because that is what a startup is. A startup is something that grows and scales. And I do see that a couple of times where we do get applications from people who might have been working on something for 5 years, but it's just not getting there. And that's okay. That's completely normal, but you have to make the call to make that change. And, it's not a lost cost fallacy. You're going to have to, say, okay, I'm going to start something new, or a new product. And every single startup that ever succeeded basically went through that process. So they were always something else before they pivoted into the thing that became the main product.
And I think this pandemic is shining a spotlight for founders on, the fact that their customers might be experiencing new pain points, or, that the business landscape is changing. And so it's actually, I think for some people, it's kind of, you don't have a choice. Like you need to pivot, it's pivot or die. And so, I think now is a great time to be pivoting your business, or to taking a step back and reflecting and assessing and saying, is this working? Are my customers still my customers, and are their pain points still the same pain points?
Yep. And I've seen companies that people have started in the last 3 months go from 0 to now doing millions in revenue. It is, the opportunity is there for the right business in the right market. And I think we're going to see a lot more around even what I call remote living. So people now, when they're working remotely, there's a lot of productivity tools, and, Zoom's exploded, but what about people's lives offline when we're remote? So there's a lot of growth corridors. I'm also really interested in women's health and underserved markets that traditional investors don't get. So we have seen so much happen in the reusable kind of undies space, periods, all that stuff. I've loved the innovation there. Anything to do with pregnancy, children, menopause, anything that's like traditionally they've just not been backed. Super excited about that space as well.
Yes, I agree. And you've obviously received the funding and are running Atto at the perfect time. So it's very exciting. Now, Atto is focused on women-led businesses and women with an idea. Why is it important to have a pre-accelerator focused on women, and what makes your pre-accelerator different to other accelerators or pre-accelerators in that it, accommodates women's needs?
So one of the big things I found with accelerators traditionally is that they made you basically relocate. So if you wanted to get into StartMate, it used to be that you relocated to Sydney, or Y Combinator that you would relocate to Mountain View. So there was a huge problem there for if you were a woman with children, as much as you kind of think, oh, how exciting it would be to go, move my family, often if your kids are in school or you need childcare, it's very hard for you to just get up and move your whole family and livelihood into another location. So that was the number one reason why it was remote to begin with, because I think that it's just really hard, and you don't have to be based in these locations anymore to succeed. So that was a thing that I think is important from the female perspective. The other thing I found was, now as a mum, that I can't necessarily get to networking events in the evenings. I don't have the capacity to go to dinners every night and drink and network with people in the industry like that it used to be like that. You could go to a meetup every night, you'd have the time. So I think people are increasingly time poor when they have commitments. So one of the things around Atto was scheduling it during lunchtime. So, that people could be able to, if they had a job, maybe they could take their lunch time and listen to the webinar and the courseware online. Or if they're, kids are at school or something like that. I just think scheduling events at like 5 or 7 is one of the toughest time for busy parents to actually make. And so simple things like that, that change the kind of game. And so that was one of the things in the scheduling that was making it flexible. So there is the contact hour each week at 11 on Wednesdays, but the rest of the program can be completely flexible and done in someone's own time, late in the evenings or whenever they can. So that was a thing. And then before, there were actually not many pre-accelerator programs. There's still not many pre-accelerator programs. Most of them, as I've said, like earlier on in the call, that they're focused on people with traction. So they require a company to have traction, and they really want to kind of slowly get to the companies that are already established and it's successful, that they can then make an investment, which just leaves out, if you're starting out, I mean, those programs completely aren't geared to you. And then for other programs that I've seen that are, I guess, focused early stage startups, a lot of it is very much theoretical. So you'll go along and you'll learn about startup governance, and there'll be people there from corporate, you might get some KPMG or Ernst & Young, and they're talking about how to build a startup. And I just found through my own experience that all of that stuff is great, and it's really, good to know, but how do you actually make that first action? What do you need to do in the next hour, the next week, the next 90 days? And that's where that obsession with customers and, being able to build products and get your hands dirty can really help. So it is very much like, that's why I love no code, the practical aspect of Atto, getting real world operators and people who've been founders to teach the program. All of these things are subtle differentiators.
And I just love and think it makes so much sense that we have a pre-accelerator designed for female founders that is led by a woman who is also a founder. And so,
well, I think that's a problem with a lot of investment firms that focus on female founders, because I'm like, at the end of the day, we need wealth distribution. We need women to be actually collecting the money that they can then invest in the next generation. That's how we're going to make real change. And I feel like if you've got a female founder program that's led by a board and founding team of 5 men, are we really seeing new school long-term change? No, we're just all working for the same kind of system. So that's why I believe that these programs that are designed for certain target communities should be run by those communities themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And Atto is such a great example of that. So you keep referring to the indie approach and the indie movement, and I think we should talk more about this. So Atto really champions this indie way, which is all about no code, maybe raising capital and seeking investment, but not necessarily straight away. And so often in accelerator programs, the success is dependent on whether you raise capital. But really what you're looking at is how to support female founders to build sustainable, profitable businesses that don't necessarily need funding from the start, but maybe need funding to scale later on. And also that you don't necessarily need to spend tons of money up front getting a developer to build, $100,000, $200,000 platform, but rather spend, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, learn how to do it yourself, learn how to build on the program and the app yourself, so that, it's more grassroots. It's a great kind of lean startup entrepreneurial model. So why do you think this approach is particularly valuable for female founders?
Yeah, definitely. And it's a big thing. And it's basically came out of my own experience, right? So I went through that. I was 10 years ago reading TechCrunch and seeing everyone announce their funding. And I was around, Airbnb founders, early Instagram founders, all the people starting businesses. And I was like, this is the way to be successful. This is, what you have to do. You've got to raise money, be in Silicon Valley, hire as many people as possible, get your funding announcements featured in the press, and you sail off into the sunset. And then it was only through being in that and having a taste of that, so raising about 1.4 Australian dollars, and then being right in the epicenter and realizing what's going on behind the scenes, that I kind of saw a broken system. I saw this system where, if you're not growing 20% month on month, you're broken. Or if you're the on-demand economy in San Francisco, when I was there, 2015, there's just a huge homeless population with people getting donuts on demand and massages on demand and all of this stuff. And I just thought, this is all kind of now not why I got into tech in the first place, to build products. I wanted to kind of help people, and all of a sudden it's like the haves and the haves not, and what the impact on the environment, all this stuff. So there's a lot of things behind that rationale. And then also going through that process and just having the investors be, basically anti-family. And that was like one of the biggest turning points for me. Then I started doing a lot of research into the space of companies such as Buffer. So Buffer is an investor advisor in Cloudpeats, but they actually raised $4 million and then returned some of the investor capital. There's also Gumroad is an example of that. So there started to be these successful companies with incredible revenue that started to turn against this growth at all costs, Silicon Valley, raise as much money as possible approach. And they're doing very well. And they had fantastic company cultures. Their products were still being market leading, and they were still competing. And so now, over the last couple of years, the bootstrap movement, or the indie capital movement, and alternative investment movement has just exploded. And people are now much more accommodating for non-traditional pathways in startups. And we've seen one locally in BuildKite. So BuildKite were Aussie continuous integration developer startup, and they bootstrapped to begin with, or raised a small amount of capital from Matt Allen's Pick and Shovel. Recently, they raised 28 million. So they've already got to a part where they know what they're doing. They have product market fit. They have a repeatable acquisition model, and now they can expand. Atlassian actually were a really great indie success story as well. 8 years in, they bootstrapped, then they raised the funding. I just think the approach of, you've got to start something new and go raise $1 million, and that's how you start, just isn't really reality. And it also sets you up for failure. Whereas in taking your time, really figuring out what you're doing, building your company on your own terms, not diluting your cap table early on, because a lot of the investment deals used to be quite predatory as well. So it's like, I want 10% of your company for, $100,000 investment or something. And the industry's come on a lot since then, but there's all these things that are kind of part of it. So I think it just offers a whole new way to kind of build a startup.
Yeah, and I just want to add my personal experience, Kate. You've helped us pivot and launch Oneline, our virtual membership for women, and rather than me using investor money and investing tons of money in getting a developer and kind of building out this app and website without knowing whether anyone would buy the membership. Instead, I've worked with you, you've helped us, you've redone our website. And then since then, I've been able to get into the nitty gritty of it and learn and, kind of learn how to use Zapier and learn what different membership models are out there. And then you've given me the chance to kind of, be able to make changes myself and adapt the website based on what our members' needs are. So I'm not stuck in one kind of app or approach that may not work down the track. And I've been loving learning, and at times I get lost in these like holes of online chats and help functions through Squarespace and whatever. But overall, I'm just really loving and feeling empowered being able to learn it myself.
And that's such a good point, because I also think there's a misconception in startups that people think having a team or having a money will solve your problems. And neither is true, because you can have, be CEO and have a team of 50 and the problem arises and you think, oh, that person can do it. Now I've got to hire someone that. Often it's still yourself figuring stuff out. Part of being an entrepreneur, like from one person to a 1,000 employees, is you're always the person just figuring the stuff out. And I think the sooner that a founder is exposed to that kind of mentality of thinking where, hey, I need to figure this out. I can't just hire a developer or an agency to figure out my product market fit, or I can't hire a magical marketer to acquire my customers. You actually have to roll your sleeves up and go, okay, how am I going to make this work? And how can I get stuck into this? Or how can I learn about this? The more that you have that culture of just learning and 10xing your skill set. And I just think in every great founder, that's a trait where they aren't afraid to just learn stuff, and it's required to really succeed. And that's one thing that I'd be turned off about if a founder was like reluctant to kind of solve problems. I just think, oh, they're not going to get further than 6 months time, because if they keep expecting someone else to come in and do this. And that's why no code's brilliant, because everything's out there. You just need an internet connection and, yes, a bit of time and attention to figure it out. And as you start to scale, you want to hire those people and you want to outsource and everything, but you still need to know and do the hard work yourself to get there. So that's why Atto is teaching people to get in and DIY it. It's about taking personal accountability and responsibility to get started, because I think it's so key in the early days.
Awesome. I want to pause and just see if anyone has any questions, whether you want to unmute yourself and ask Kate a question or share it in the chat box. Either. I can keep asking questions all day, but okay, yeah, Amy, go for it.
Hey Sheree, how you going?
Good. Nice to see you on here.
Great to see you too. Hi Kate. Thank you very much for doing this. Great to hear your experience and what you're doing. I might have missed it, but no code. Could you just give me a little bit more information about no code?
Yeah, definitely. And that's, we haven't really broken down what no code actually means. So it's a great question. So no code's kind of like this whole movement of what they're calling visual programming. So traditionally, if you wanted to build something, you needed to know like a coding language. So you might know like Ruby on Rails or Python or whatever. Now there's lots of what you see is what you get type editing. So if I want to and Squarespace is one example, and it's a very consumer friendly example. But you can just go on there and like drag and drop and create a website without having to, install a CMS or create a database, all of that. So it's a bunch of new tools that allow anyone anywhere to hook up kind of websites and apps. There's also, things like Webflow. So that's like a little bit harder to learn than, and a lot of designers. So the thing about no code is a lot of programmers, designers are actually using no code tools now as part of their job. And originally there were criticism was, oh, is this going to replace our work or that kind of thing? But they're using it to augment their skills. But I noticed like when I was building with Cloud Peeps, if I needed to put some marketing pages up, I would have had to go through our dev team and say, okay, like we need these pages. Here's the graphic design, here's this and the copy. And it would take weeks to do. What no code and companies have done, like in just that space alone, means that I can do it myself within an hour or two. And speeds everything.
It's the answer to everything. Empower the people.
Yeah,
give them
absolutely.
What they need and let them do it how they want to. And take out the middleman. Like let's get rid of the middleman.
And I think it's one of the most exciting things to happen in tech, because I think there were so many bottlenecks just even in dev teams and everything. And I think now anyone can put up a product. I created an events app in Glide apps, which is brilliant. It was just my database is Google spreadsheet, hooked up a Glide app, and all of a sudden I had a mobile app. So that's something that would have taken $10,000 or $20,000, 3 or 4 years ago, and probably 6 months of work in someone's pipeline if I didn't know how to code myself. So
what was it you created? What was it?
It was an event discovery app, using Glide. So part of Atto as well, we'll be walking through, we have a no code mentor in residence. So that's also something that we're doing that's unique to other accelerators. And when we go through and look at the MVP that you want to create, the no code mentor and resident will go, okay, here's like 5 solutions you could do, and these are the apps you could build it in. So it's much like more real time and affordable, and kind of to get these things built. So no code's actually debatable as a term, because a lot of people in the no code industry hate the word no code because it is an injustice into the amount of potential that this whole thing has. So I think in the future it will just be like you're building a website and there's all these great tools to do it.
Cool, thank you.
Kate, so Sharon's asked a question in the chat box about, the kinds of businesses that are a good fit for the program. Are there types of tech businesses that you wouldn't take, or are there specific industries or types of businesses that you will consider?
Yep, and that's a fantastic question, Sharon, that I've been getting quite a lot. So I actually updated our FAQs to really spell this out. So the businesses, we are open to any type of tech-enabled business. So it can be anything, you could be doing something in the agribusiness space, you could be just something in health tech, fashion, beauty, e-commerce, direct-to-consumer. It across the board is fine. The only businesses that I wouldn't consider are businesses that what I call traditional kind of services-based businesses, or businesses that aren't actually a tech startup. And I think there's miscommunication in Australia about the word startup. I think startup has actually been taken as a term and applied to all small businesses, and you'll often see people bang on about startups now when it's actually they're not building a startup. So if you were, say, a podiatrist and you wanted to create a website for your business to service people locally, that's not a company that I consider a tech startup and wouldn't be suitable to Atto. If you're going to create a marketplace platform of all podiatrists in Australia that are looking to connect with their clients in a marketplace and manage their business and counting invoices and everything, that's a tech-enabled business that can scale, and that would be suitable for Atto. So it really depends. But if you apply and your business is something that I don't think is scalable, part of the beauty of the process is that's where I'll often see, oh, that's a really good market and that founder's brilliant. They just need a bit of help with figuring out how to scale this model, because you might have a mission and you want to help people do X, Y, Z, but you don't really know about how to go about the product solution. So we can also help figure out the product solution throughout the Atto program. So you can't be really too early to just submit an idea on market opportunity.
We've also had a question from Renata. Could you say more about how Atto and Oneline are working together?
Well, so Sheree, do you want to jump in, or I can jump in?
Yeah, if you want to start.
Yeah, so Atto was born out of One Roof as a community, and then we've worked very closely with Oneline with Indie Labs as it's grown. So at the moment, there is no official affiliation. It's not a direct kind of, they're not the same company or anything. But what we'd hope to do over time is to have partnerships with the membership, and as hopefully we get sponsorships and more business in this space. Being part of Atto means you're also part of Oneline, and the whole community can kind of be one great female founder goodness. So hopefully we'll be able to cement that more in the coming weeks, and continue to support each program or each offering.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we did have an intention for the demo day to be hosted at the One Roof co-working space, but that'll, the demo day will likely be a virtual event. And yeah, I think over time, as you said, we'll be working on ways to keep supporting each other. Obviously very similar common passions and interests and target audience. Kate is one of the judges for our her startup pitch night, which is at the end of the month. And so, yeah, there's a lot of crossover and a lot of ways that we're supporting each other, just like doing this Q&A today. Kate, do you want to touch on your vision for Atto? I was reading that, your plan over the next 5 years is to build a tech school for female founders. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yes. So I think that, like any entrepreneur, it's like you start out and you're like, okay, doing this, and then I just see the massive opportunity. And I think that for me, there are a lot of like coding schools like Lambda School and Flatiron Academy and General Assembly, and a lot of education, traditional kind of education. But I haven't really seen a global female founder school that is teaching people all over the world how to build a tech startup. And part of our mission is to democratize entrepreneurship and make it accessible to all. So as what I've seen over the last decade, it's not just me and a bunch of guys in a room who are all investing in each other, and you've got to be, you know, in Silicon Valley with X amount of Twitter followers and you're only allowed in then. You know, it's a very much like traditionally been quite a hard industry to I think really break through. I mean, it seems inclusive, but as we've seen with investment and female founders in general, it hasn't been inclusive. So that's why I call it a new school. So it's, I just want to kind of change the world in a way, make it new school, that if you want to have kids, you want to be based here, you want to do this, you want to work on a really weird industry that traditionally people wouldn't get, you can do that. And you've got all the tools and the resources. And overall, I'd also like to get a micro fund. So I was posting about this and turn Atto into actually a micro or a nano, or actually Atto is lower than nano. So that's why it was called Atto, because it was all about a metrics prefix of really small scale. But, you know, being able to invest in founders, like $5,000 just to get started, invest in your incorporation costs and your cloud services, and just get started. And I should notice that note on the call, we also have Sian Simpson, who's dialing in, and she's can't join us live, but Sian's brilliant. She's just joined us as our community director, and she's actually based in New Zealand, in Auckland, outside of Auckland on a little island. She also left Silicon Valley about the same time as me. And she's launching a pilot in New Zealand with a great sponsorship partner that we'll announce soon. She's just waving there now. But that's something I'd love to see Atto all around the globe. So we have Australian Atto, we've got North American Atto, we've got New Zealand Atto, and you know that everyone has an amazing alumni community and helping each other. And it's the power of the network and building businesses and making money.
And brilliant to have this global network of female founders. And yeah, congratulations, Sian, for being involved in this. I think it's excellent. Now, the nano investing concept, is that something that you're going to be offering for this cohort of Atto participants?
Not at the moment. So probably for the next couple of years, we'll be using the Launch Vic funding to fund and continue the program and expand the program. And then what I would love to do is to launch Atto as this kind of nano investment model. The only thing is, because, and this is the problem with some of the startup industry and investment, because it has been traditionally gatekeeper, in order for me to even give, say, someone $5,000 through an entity, it will cost me $10,000 to $20,000, plus I have to go get a financial, all these things. And so I'm like, oh, even if I wanted to give people money today, it'll cost more to give them the money because it's such small amounts. And a lot of investors would actually shy away from this because, you know, no one wants to actually work on the early level because there's just no return on the management fees and the hiring of the staff. It's just not all worth it. So over the next couple of years, and hopefully it can be fast tracked, but I'd really love to figure out a process to how to administrate such a small fund. Because I'm like, I'll do it. It's not, you know, it's about the bigger purpose for me. It's not about collecting a salary or whatever. But yeah, a lot of the investors just don't really want to touch it because it's so, the legal fees and all of that. So there might be ways to do it with equity crowdfunding. That's why you traditionally see the grant-based model. But I think having this micro in the investment, maybe a return on investment and further funding, is really exciting for true change. So it's not just kind of the odd grant or sponsorship here and there. It's successful female founders backing other female founders and a whole ecosystem. And we see it a little bit with SheEO, that model. But again, I don't think they're truly focused on what I call like tech startups, and it's not necessarily female founders just backing female founders in a flexible way. I really want to see this be quite fast paced and flexible because it is such small amounts of capital.
Yeah, Kate, we are very grateful to you. You're disrupting the entrepreneurial space, the accelerator space, the investment space, and all very needed for female founders, right? Like, we just need to change these systems so that we can see more female founders build successful startups.
Yeah. And I think that's just it. I mean, anyone can do it. That's what I want to get across with Atto. Like, if you're prepared to just speak up and just say whatever and ruffle a few feathers, I mean, you can get started. I think we're just almost afraid sometimes because we don't know. But often industries get disrupted by people who are outside that industry because they're a bit naive of, what's involved in doing it. But it's about the perseverance and thinking, thinking things can be done differently. And that's what it comes down to me. I just think this all could be done differently, and so that's why we're having a go at it.
Yeah. Can you give some examples of amazing female founders or women-led startups, either through the Atto program or beyond, that you've been really impressed by, and why?
Yeah, well, one of the kind of flagship founders that I refer to quite a lot that went through Atto was Hannon. So Hannon started Aerobe. So I just remember the first day I met Hannon, she was working for another startup, I think in like content or marketing, and then had this idea for sustainable fashion. And then we iterated a few times on her marketplace. We created a share tribe account, and she was just so great at testing it out. And I don't own many designer clothes at all, but I had a Prada bag that I got from a friend secondhand like a decade ago, and I never ever used it. And so I said, Hannah, can you sell this for me? And then because I was like, I'm never going to put this on eBay. By the time I put it, so it just sat in my cupboard. And like a couple of days later, she came back and she's like, I've sold it for $400. And I was like, wow. So just even her getting stuff done, her speed, she just impressed me that she would go make stuff happen and, test it out. And then when she graduated the program, she then got into StartMate and then has since raised funding, which she'll talk about in her own time. But I just thought that was an amazing trajectory in like 6 months, going from completely starting out, like, kind of an idea, to now completely cemented in Australia's startup community and going global. And so she was super impressive and is super impressive. And then I was also impressed with, basically all the founders in the program. I just think they were all brilliant. We also had Adeline from Zove Beauty, and Adeline does skincare rollers. So they might be jade or rose quartz. They've kind of, I don't know if you've seen them on Instagram, but just her with her sales and just acquisition and just staying the course and growth. Like each time I chat to her, she's got a new metric about how many stockists she's got and stuff like that. So the number one thing for me, for all founders that I'm advising, is velocity. So I just really want to see the velocity of what they're doing. So if I chat to them 1 week, they're like, I'm thinking about doing this and this, and I chat to them the next week and they've gone out and done that, I'm just so impressed. And I'm so, it's so energizing and enthusiastic. But if I chat to someone and they're like, I've got an idea for something, and then you chat 2 years later and they're like, I've still got that idea, that's what I want to help them make that happen. Take those steps and get out there and do it, because you don't need to be kind of waiting around. You can be starting today. So that's one of the things when I'm coaching, I'm always like, what can you do right now to make that difference?
Are you going to write a book called Velocity?
That probably already exists, but I'd love to write the book on the indie way. So in between Atto babies and day-to-day work and operations, I'll see where I can do it.
I actually wanted to ask you about that, Kate. How are you feeling having Elizabeth and being pregnant and running Atto and doing your consultancy work and, riding through the pandemic? How are you feeling about it all?
Well, it was quite funny because one of my friends was joking that 2020 and 2021 are like on track. I'm like, oh, Q4, Q goal. It's like, because a lot of people are like, oh, my whole year's out of whack. So I think I'm definitely a planner, and thinking about, I think if you start to think even 12 to 18 to 24 months ahead, and that's one thing having babies does to you, because you're like, oh, 9 months. Before, when I had no children, it would all be just next month, the month after, or maybe I'll go traveling here, and there was no kind of concept of longevity of time. It was all just kind of month to month. But then having a baby, you start to think 9 months, and then it's all about milestones. So everything is about time. Every single thing with kids is about time. So I think it has made me be a lot more conscious of planning and how I can, and also adjusting my expectations. So it's one thing I love about Atto is it's batch driven. So we can have a batch, Then there'll be a break in between where we've got our alumni community, but it's less busy, and then we'll have a hectic batch again. So it's actually quite great for flexibility. And that's one thing I encourage all female founders to do. If you are, interested in having children, or you have young children, design a business that also works around your life. So and it can be done. So I just think you don't always need to be working in the same format every day. You can create pockets in your life where you have less work and more work. So that's one way I've kind of made it work, I guess, so far.
Yeah. What would you say to a female founder who's sitting on the fence thinking, should I apply? Shouldn't I? I don't know if I have time. I've got so much going on. I don't know if I'm the right fit. I don't know. And doubting themselves. What would your advice be to them?
I think that having the first person who believes in you and backs you, if you're kind of, unsure, is incredibly powerful. And that's one thing that I think Atto is a sign, is it's just like going through the process, having other people in the cohort, as Sean's just said, just do it. There's so many reasons. I remember when I was just starting out, when I was quitting my job and I just wanted to go to San Francisco, and my friend Eddie said, like, if you never go, you'll never know. So sometimes you just don't know until you get in. And I think all startups are like that too. You don't know what you'll end up building. You don't know where you'll end up, but it's through the action that you learn. I think you learn so much from just action and each step than you do kind of analyzing. And, sometimes you just got to stop thinking and just stop analyzing. Time commitment wise, I think it's something that we are coming to the end of the year. And if you have felt that your year hasn't been super productive, or COVID has kind of got you a bit down, especially with Victoria with the restrictions, it has been quite, depressing for a lot of people. We've been at home a lot and it's been winter. So I think if you want to kind of end your year on a high note, going through Atto is a great way to do that as well, and just create a bit of structure, find great people to be accountable with, and end 2020 and go, this is what I created and I'm proud of that.
Awesome. We've only got a couple more minutes. I just want to check if anybody else has a question. Kate, do you think we should post a link to Atto in the chat box?
Yeah, I'll just do that now. And then also I will post this recording and then follow up with people on Eventbrite if you need to refer back to anything. And if there's anything that comes up, feel free to contact Sean, myself, and Sheree as well. We're all open to questions about anything female founders, and Atto and Oneline, and the pitch night I'm super excited about as well, and so many brilliant perks on that event.
Yeah, and lots of pitches to work through, which is very exciting.
I'll put my email in the box as well there.
Yeah, perfect. Kate, anything else you want to end off on that I may not have asked you, or you may not have shared about the program, or is there anything else?
Just to be clear, so it starts in a week and a half, so it's going to be September 30th, and we're going to accept up to 15 places in Australia and 4 in New Zealand at this stage. The stages, Victoria and New Zealand are both sponsored, so the program's free for founders from that region, and they're accepted on a rolling basis. So it really will be first come, first served that satisfy the requirements to get into the program. And so, we look forward to receiving as many applications as possible, and would love to connect, because we've also got 2021. So if there is a little bit where you're like, I just can't do it this year, please make sure you form that relationship so we can build that for next year's batch as well.
Kate, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your journey today. Thank you for all you do to support and back female founders. I think Australia and the world, given this is now becoming global, is very lucky to have someone like you really, making a difference and working hard at, changing systems and structures and being able to support women in this way. And yeah, just thank you for being so giving and giving of your time and energy to women and startups in our community. We're all very grateful. And yeah, really looking forward to seeing Atto come to life, and really encourage everyone here to apply if you feel like it's the right fit, and to ask Kate more questions, and Sian as well if you're not sure. And yeah, congratulations again. It's fantastic.
And just on that, Sheree, everything you just said to me back at you with just all of your support and female founders. I mean, it's incredible. Anyone who's part of One Roof will know that everything then is all true of Sheree too. So thank you so much, Sheree, and for being a busy mum as well and finding the time to talk today.
We make it work. Thanks to everyone for being here today. Yeah, it's really great conversation, and we hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Okay. See everyone. Bye.
Bye.
See you.